video I'm going to prove from first principles that the derivative of sinh x with respect to x is cosh x. So we know from first principles that the derivative of sinh x is the limit as delta x approaches 0 of sinh of x plus h minus sinh of x. Sorry, this should be a delta x all over delta x. And now we know sinh x is e to the x minus e to the minus x over 2. So this is the limit as delta x approaches 0 of e to the x minus e to the minus x. So this should be plus h, or plus delta x over 2. Subtract sinh of x, which is e to the x minus e to the minus x, over 2. And now if we combine these two fractions, we get the limit as delta x approaches 0 of e to the x plus delta x minus e to the x minus e to the minus x plus delta x plus e to the minus x. Oh sorry, this should have been multiplied by 1 over delta x, and so this should all be over 2 delta x. And now this is the same as the limit as delta x approaches 0 of a half times e to the x plus delta x minus e to the x over delta x minus e to the minus x plus delta x minus, should be minus e to the minus x over delta x. And so we know from first principles that this is just the derivative of e to the x, which I proved in a separate video as e to the x, and this is the derivative of e to the minus x. So this is going to become the limit as delta x approaches 0 of a half times e to the x minus the derivative of e to the minus x. So now in a separate video I proved the chain rule, which we can use to evaluate the derivative of e to the minus x. So using the chain rule, we see that if f of x equals e to the x and g of x equals minus x, then f composed with g of x is going to equal e to the minus x. And the derivative of f composed with g of x is just going to be the derivative of f composed with g of x times the derivative of g of x. Now the derivative of f of x composed with g of x is just going to be e to the x composed with minus x, which is e to the minus x, and then we multiply by the derivative of minus x, which is going to be minus 1. And now this just becomes minus e to the minus x. So that means this will become minus e to the minus x. And now because we have no more terms in delta x, we can just write this as e to the x plus e to the minus x over 2, which is cosh of x, and we're done. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or video suggestions, leave them in the comments below, and if you want to see more content like this, subscribe now.